What is going on, everybody? Thank you guys so much for joining me. And of course, today I'll be continuing my series on my NHL 2021-2022 season predictions. And for today's video, we'll be discussing a team that is up and coming and continues to get better and is definitely on the rise here, the New York Rangers. So over the course of the last couple of seasons, New York Rangers have really started to turn some heads and have started moving upwards in the right direction. Their rebuild is pretty much over and they're looking to be more competitive and compete for a playoff spot this season. And even though they've been a very exciting team to watch, these last few years, they've been falling just short of a playoff spot. Obviously in 2020, they fell in the qualifying round to the Carolina Hurricanes. And this past season, even though they had a good season, they missed the playoffs. So take a look at what they did last season. They finished with a 27, 23, and 6 record for a total of 60 points, which was only good enough for 5th in a very tough East Division. However, it wasn't all that bad, but wasn't good enough to make the playoffs. Even though when you look at these stats, it's very solid across the board. 10th in the league in goals for per game at 3.14. Goals against, not bad either. 13th in the league at 2.77 goals against per game. Power play was relatively solid, 20.7% at 14th in the league. And then 10th in the penalty kill department, 82.2%. But I think the downfall with this team was just like that tough division. They really struggle against the top 4 teams in that East Division, whereas they really just completely destroyed and ganged up on those bottom 3 teams, which is why their record was pretty solid. However, their struggles against the top 4 is a big reason why they missed the playoffs. So taking a look at their top 5 scorers from last season, their leading scorer being Artemi Panarin, who in only 42 games had 17 goals and 41 assists for 58 points. I mean, Panarin's always been one of the better players in the league, but ever since coming to New York, he's established himself as a legit superstar, and now it's unquestionable that he is one of, if not the best winger in the game. And in second, we got Mika Zibanejad, who in a 56-game season had 24 goals, which led the team, as well as 26 assists for 50 points. Him too, ever since coming to New York, things really clicked, and he really took his game to another level, and he's become one of the more elite goal scorers in the league. And, you know, he's just an underrated center all around. And third, we have Ryan Strome, who had a solid 14 goals and 35 assists for 49 points. Again, this is another guy who the best years of his career have been with the New York Rangers. I mean, when he was with the Oilers, he struggled statistically. With the Islanders, he had some pretty solid seasons early on, but, you know, he was not really the same player. Now he's just with a Rangers team that has a ton of offensive weapons, and especially playing with a guy like Artemi Panarin, Strome has been able to thrive in an offensive role. And in fourth, we have Pavel Buchnevich, who had 54 games played with 20 goals and 28 assists for 48 points. Buchnevich, to me, is just a very underrated winger, and over the course of his career at the Rangers, he was a very solid top 6 option, and, you know, still relatively young, so with the St. Louis Blues, who he's now with, hopefully he can take his game to another level. In fifth, we have the Norris Trophy winner, Adam Fox, who in 55 games, 5 goals and 42 assists for 47 points. Still an extremely young defenseman, but I don't think he came out of nowhere, because I think a lot of people knew that he had this offensive upside. I mean, his rookie year, he had a 40-point season, but like he really took control as that number 1 defenseman on that Rangers team and just led them offensively from that blue line. And he's just a terrific talent, and he's still so young and can only get better from here. And in goal, of course, their starting goaltender being Igor Shesterkin, who had a really respectable season, 35 games played, 16, 14, and 3 record, a 2.62 goals against average, and a 916 save percentage. Just a solid goaltender. He's still relatively young. I think he's going to come into his own and get even better from here on out. So all around, this is a very solid Rangers team that just kind of lucked out in a really tough division. That's why they missed the playoffs, but there's definitely a lot to look forward to, especially for this upcoming season. So entering this season, there is some expectations for this Rangers team to take the next step and make the playoffs. I mean, these last couple years, they've been on the cusp, but now they want to prove to everyone that they're a legit team to be taken seriously. Taking a look at their offseason moves, I would say it was a relatively quiet offseason. And looking at what they got in place for what they lost, can't necessarily say that they're a better team than they were last season. So the major key addition they have here is Barclay Goodrow coming from the Tampa Bay Lightning. He's going to be a solid depth piece, going to score on that third line. I think it just improves the offensive depth on this Rangers team because they are very top 6 dominant with Zibanejad, Panarin, Strome, guys like that really carrying the offense. I think they could use a little bit more depth scoring, and Barclay Goodrow could certainly provide that. As for what they lost, however, they decided to trade away Pavel Buchnevich to the St. Louis Blues. Maybe this is a cap dump, you know, maybe he wasn't going to sign an extension or they just couldn't afford him. Whatever the case may be, this is pretty big loss in their top 6. They did acquire some depth pieces like Sammy Blais, but I don't see that as a significant addition since he's most likely going to be playing on that fourth line, as well as Ryan Reeves, who could, provide some toughness and grit, but in terms of what he's going to contribute on the ice, not a ton in terms of his offensive play. Like I said, I don't consider this a much better team on paper. However, I still feel like they're a relatively solid team that's only going to continue to get better. You can look at who I have as the top 5 scorers for the Rangers this season. First, obviously, has to be Artemi Panarin, but I have him scoring an amazing 108 points, 30 goals, and 78 assists. I mean, we definitely know that he has this type of production in him. I mean, the first year he was with the Rangers, he was on pace for well over 100 points. This past season, he was on a 113-point pace over 82 games. He's just one of the best wingers in the league, and I see no doubt in my mind that he should probably score over 100 points if he's fully healthy. Obviously, one of the better playmakers in the league. That's why I have him, hovering around assists per game. I definitely think he can do it. I mean, last year he was very close to an assist per game, and he should score roughly 30 goals. He might even get more than 30. I think that's very possible. But regardless, I do expect 100-plus points. And second, I'm going to go with Mika Zibanejad to have 38 goals to lead the team, as well as 38 assists for 76 points. Like I said, a very underrated center, and I really think that he can drive the play himself. Whether you believe it or not, I know a lot of people, especially people I know, they feel that Zibanejad benefits greatly with playing with a guy like Artemi Panarin, and they feel like his numbers might be inflated. I totally disagree with that, especially when you consider that Zibanejad and Panarin don't even play on the same line. Now, I know they might be sharing some power play time, but regardless, I still think Mika Zibanejad is a good player, and he doesn't need another superstar to elevate his game, especially when you consider the years that he had before Panarin got there. He was still a relatively solid player. I mean, the year before Panarin got there, he had over 70 points. I definitely think he can still contribute roughly that. He should be on the verge of 40 goals and 70-plus points in his sleep. Then third, I'm going to go with Adam Fox to score 9 goals and 54 assists for 63 points. I mean, obviously the reigning Norris winner, dynamic offensive defenseman. His skill, his playmaking, his hockey IQ, his offensive awareness is completely off the chart, and I would expect nothing less than 60 points. And he probably should get north of that, especially, running that power play with the stacked offensive team that the Rangers have. Fourth, I'm going to go with Ryan Strome, having a relatively solid 20 goals and 40 assists for 60 points. I mean, like I said before, he works really well with Panarin, and the best years of his career offensively have come with the Rangers, so I see no reason why he shouldn't hit about 60 points. I might even be underrating him because I think his points per game, I have it a little bit lower than last season, so I can definitely see him pushing 65 plus, but honestly, I think that's relatively solid for him regardless. And in fifth, I'm going with a wild card here, Alexis Lafreniere, the former #1 overall pick from that 2020 draft. I see him having a massive bounce back season and a very solid breakout sophomore year, 22 goals and 32 assists for 54 points. Now, it's very possible that even in his second season, he might not even reach this level of production, but regardless, I do expect him to take another step forward. But for me, this is purely based on his ceiling. I mean, he is a #1 overall pick for a reason. He's supposed to be a franchise winger, so I only think that he should be getting better. I mean, he had a crap rookie year, but I expect a lot more from him. And hopefully, a low-key breakout season, hopefully he eventually becomes the superstar that he drafted. I mean, the #1 overall pick, a ton of pressure on him, and he really needs to realize that potential for this Rangers team to take the next step to being a legitimate playoff team and eventually a Stanley Cup contender. All right, so getting into my expectations for the New York Rangers this season. I mean, I just really like this team, and although there's a lot of people that say they're a fringe playoff team, and maybe that is the case, they're kind of in the bubble. They're in a tough division, so I could see a scenario where they, have a similar year as last season, have a relatively solid year, but just don't quite have enough to make the playoffs. However, I'm going to go bold here, and I'm going to say that they are going to make the playoffs and crack that second wild card to represent the 5th seed in the Metropolitan Division. So like I said, I have them 5th in the Metropolitan Division with a 45-31-6 record for a total of 96 points, and I have them making the playoff. I just really like this team. I think they have a ton of potential. There's a lot of excitement around this New York Rangers team. Great offense, probably a top 10 offensive team in the league next season. Their goaltending, to me, very solid. I like Shesterkin. I think he's going to be a really, really good goaltender for the future. And Georgiev, not a bad backup, honestly. And also a big key acquisition that I think people are overlooking here, Gerard Gallant. He's one of the better coaches in the league. And now that he's going to be running that Rangers team, that could really change their identity, make them more of a complete team. And I think that could be enough to propel this team into the playoffs because coaching is very important. Like, look at Barry Trotz with the Islanders. You need good coaching to run a very solid team. And I think the Rangers with him behind the bench, have a ton of potential to really turn some heads and be a legitimate playoff team. So yes, you could definitely make the case that they're not good enough to make the playoffs, especially in that tough Metropolitan Division. But I definitely think with the talent they have, with the better coaching they have, I think they're fully capable of being a playoff team. So this is my hot take. I'm thinking that the Rangers are going to make the playoffs. Although maybe it's not even a hot take. I think a lot of people could anticipate this Rangers team taking that next step to being a playoff team. But for me, this is just where I see this team going. I think they're only moving up. And, the first step of moving in the right direction is, making the playoffs, right? Anyway, so that is going to wrap up my season expectations on the New York Rangers. You guys have a similar mindset with me and you think that this team is ready and they're poised to take that next step to being a playoff team in the Eastern Conference? Or do you think it's maybe a year too soon and you don't quite see them as playoff ready, especially in a very tough Metropolitan Division? If you like, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section and let me know your opinions on this Rangers team. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Click like if you liked it. Please consider subscribing to the channel and I will talk to you in the next one. See you guys later.